and good evening, and welcome back. Kind of a short week. I say that because as soon as you get it started, it's going to be the mayhem that awaits us. Christmas. And Merry Christmas to every one of you, and I hope that this week will be joyous, that you'll be hopefully being able to spend with as much family as you can. I know that it kind of gets separated and split apart at times. Some that will be traveling, some that will be traveling here, and we hope that their safe journey will be coming and going. Kind of gave a tease this morning in the title of Seeing God When We Don't See Him. Just felt the last couple of weeks of really trying to give encouragement. I think that's what the Bible's there for. I know that when someone passes, we immediately go to a Psalms to kind of get encouragement. David's words are very uplifting. We can find all kinds of encouragement, and we can also find discouragement where they need to be encouraged in the Bible. You know, you think about it, even Jesus himself had ministers. He came to him and ministered to Jesus. I mean, think, well, he's the Son of God. Why would he need any minister? Why would he need any encouragement? So even our Lord and Savior received encouragement. So over these past Sunday nights, I've been trying to offer words of encouragement to each of you, because it comes at a time where there doesn't seem to be much of it. In fact, we're more discouraged than we are encouraged. It's so easy to get discouraged. In fact, and we may sit on it, and we're going to see Gideon's example about sometimes we just say, well, that's my lot in life, and I'm just going to accept it and go on. But that really wasn't what it's supposed to be. And we can get so discouraged so easily, but Jesus knew that. Last week, I reminded us through the writings of Paul not to lose heart in doing good. And you think, well, how difficult is that? I mean, it's easy to do good, isn't it? But you can lose heart in doing good. You can be discouraged in just doing good. So you stop it. Stop it altogether. Some may have stopped years ago, decades ago. Could be a problem. But it's also, we're not to lose heart in our prayer life. That was last week as well. Because we can also get discouraged in that. We pray, and it just doesn't seem to be working out. And so I can get discouraged. I really think probably one of the best tactics our adversary can use is really discouragement. You know, just to give up. What's the use? I've seen it in a lot of people's lives. Walk away from the church entirely. Maybe for a time, maybe forever. Today I want us to look and see and use an Old Testament example with Gideon in mind, who was feeling a little discouraged right before he was chosen to fight and defeat the Midianites at God's hand. The account I want us to look at is found in Judges chapter 6. So if you'd like to turn there for a reference, that would be good. If you don't bring a Bible or have one near you, you can either have it on your phone or you can have it in the middle of the aisles. I know that there are usually one provided for you. Not something we tend to go to a lot of Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 1. Get the picture kind of what's going on. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, as soon as I read that, I said, this is not going to turn out good. Anytime that it starts out like that, we know that, okay, I'm preparing myself. So the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian overpowered Israel, and because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves dens that are in the mountains and caves and the strongholds. We here in the United States, even during Civil War time, there was a community that was bombarded. We've talked about this, David Bird and I, about that. A little town that got besieged by Grant from the water from the Mississippi. And those people were in fear of their lives, and they burrowed into caves. And they burrowed in to protect themselves from the bombardment of the Union Army. They eventually surrendered on July 4th, but the pain was so deep that over 100 years later, they never celebrated the July 4th as we do as Independence Day, because it was the fall of their community. But they lived in caves. They lived in hiding because of the enemy. When anyone decides that you have to live in caves, there is a defeated mentality, or at least you go into hiding for a while. The story doesn't start out very well, as I pointed out, what the people were doing. They were doing evil in the sight of the Lord. And like I said, after you read something like that, you kind of expect not too much good to come after that. It's almost as a reader, and if you know anything about God, something is about to happen. And the text goes on to say that even when they would go out and plant something, they were overtaken. I mean, their enemy would just come down. I don't care if you planted, and that's what you had to do, sustain yourself, to live on, to plant your crops. And can you imagine planting your garden, then all of a sudden just come in right at the harvest time, someone comes and takes it all over from you, from all your hard work and all of your sweat and tears, and it was gone? Your crops, your livelihood. But know this, the people weren't just doing bad, but was evil in the sight of the Lord. So they have to take some of this on their own, which added why they were there in the first place. God says, you listen to me, I'll bless you. You don't, this is what's going to happen. And it's an old age pattern that we see in the Old Testament. And they were being overtaken. And for a 7-year stretch, as this text says. Now let's jump down to verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. We're going to find someone that doesn't feel mighty, or that valor is something that's used here. What a way to start out a conversation from the messenger of the Lord. The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. Almost sounds like a line from a movie. Arise, you mighty man of valor. We can tell a little bit about Gideon and his mindset. He didn't feel much like that. In fact, he will tell all of what he really feels in a moment. I love it when you really get candid with the Lord. I mean, he's going to say something, and you can go the accounts of Job, you can go through David, there is a real relationship. I love it. Even when Moses disobeyed, he pleaded with God. I mean, his whole life was to lead the nation out of captivity and not just wander and wander and wander. And we finally get to the point where he can enter in, and because of his own disobedience, he was not allowed to. We talked about that, about petitioning God. He just basically pleaded with God. So there was a candid relationship, and I hope that you have a candid relationship with the Lord, that you can be able to go to him. And through Jesus Christ gives us that opportunity to go before God in our prayers. And where do we find this mighty man of valor? Is someone out in valor is usually on the battlefield and full of armor. And we may go to the military and say, where's our general? Where's our top leader? Where is this mighty man of valor? Is he sharpening his skill? No, he's beating out wheat. In fact, secretly, as it says. He has to do it in private because he knows that I better do this quick and fast before the Midianites see it, because they're going to come take it. And all of that work will be for naught. Remember, the text said every time they would plant something, they would come and the enemy would take it. What do you suppose would happen if they saw him threshing wheat? Well, they'd come in and take it from him. So this mighty man of valor is actually in reality at this point in time in hiding, trying to just keep what he had from getting it stolen from the Midianites. Verse 13 of this text, and Gideon said to him, so honest, to the angel of the Lord, see if this has anything to do with you and I and our relationship with our pleading to God. Please, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all of this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us the hand of Midian. Lord's left us. Nothing that they've left him about doing evil. I mean, we could backtrack and we could kind of straighten this out. Doesn't even go there, but that's for another time. It's worth stopping to take notice and talk a little bit about, because not only do we hear people still question God today, don't we? Isn't that what we sometimes think? You got to be honest. That we possibly could tell God, like, oh yeah, the Lord is with me, then why is this happening? That's something new. I mean, 2015, I'm sure in this upcoming year in 2016, you will hear people say, why is God allowing this to happen to me? It's an honest question. Gideon was the same way. He was feeling like that. Why do I feel like this? Why is this happening? If I'm in victory, I don't feel very victorious. Calling me a man of valor, why do I have to hide? Why do I have to feel defeated? And you're a God of promise. He's going to go back and recount that. And we may disregard the possible evil that they were doing and what led them to captivity for 7 years. But he goes on with his pleading, where are all his wonderful deeds now? It's been recounted. These stories have been passed down to us. We understand what was done in the wilderness. We understand these miracles that our fathers told and retold. Where is the blessing now, Lord? Ever feel that way? Well, if you ever have, you're not alone. Gideon did. And the strange thing about it, he was kind of willing to accept that. I'm in hiding. The Lord has left us. He's abandoned us. It's been 7 years. There hasn't been much change. Well, this is just kind of the way it goes. Gideon shows not only has a lack of faith, but maybe in this juncture of his life, we could say possibly not ye of little faith, maybe ye of no faith. And yet he is mentioned as a hero of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. Now, isn't that interesting? How can this be a pinnacle of Hebrew 11, hero of faith, and this is the dialogue we hear? Ever wondered that? Well, I've mentioned this before, and I think it's worth noting just in our lives as well. Even though we know this one incident in Gideon's life, we know other failures of individuals in the Bible, whether it be David, we go straight to Bathsheba, we go to all of these things. God isn't going straight to that as we do, because we are conditional love people, and we've talked about that too, because love does not keep a record of wrongs, but that's exactly what we like to do. And we hang on to him because we can use it engaging in battle. You've done me wrong 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm holding on to it because the day it's going to come up and I'm going to use that against you. See, and that was not the case with God. But as we hold on to something like that to use this against someone or describe now who they are. Well, he's an adulterer. We're just going to dismiss it. Paul was a murderer. Why are you sending him to us? God's not holding them accountable, especially when they came forth and they asked for forgiveness. Oh, okay, ask for forgiveness and repent, but we still hold on to it. And so it's almost kind of like we say, well, Gideon shouldn't be mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11 then. And neither should Samson. And neither should a host of others. This one failure and doubt does not represent his whole life, just like your and my sin is not represented in your whole life. That's who you are. Now, that's who you can become. And a pattern can repeat itself, and you can become exactly what your sin is. Doesn't have to be that way. Thankfully for us as well, God doesn't do that with us. And we can go through other examples, like I said, from David and Saul, who becomes Paul, and where many congregations were very leery of Paul because that's a moniker. What he has done is who he is. And why are you sending him here to us? Aren't you glad God does not see you and I for just one incident? Can you imagine that? If we had a God that says, well, you know, I know you're coming to me and we're trying to worship me, but you know what you did 15 years ago? You know, see, that's the plus of Satan. That's what he wants you to do. He wants you to go back, not looking back. Paul says to look forward. I'm forward. I'm laying that beside. I'm not going back there. I'm not going to revisit that. He doesn't see us as the one failure in the sin and make it our whole life. But sometimes that's what we do, not only to ourselves, but to others, and make ourselves included. This should not define who we are. And it's not with God, thankfully. But it is for many of us. And why is that? No one ever believes perfection for themselves. So why is it that we either hold others with contempt and hold them to that expectation? Because we want forgiveness and grace for us. Well, I know I'm not perfect, but I'm going to hold brother such and such at perfection. They should be held at that account. Where do we get that? And we do that all day long, back and forth, back and forth. But with the two that I just mentioned, how many times would people label David an adulterer? And that's it. Yes, he did commit this very atrocious sin, a mighty big sin in his life, but he also asked forgiveness of that. And God moved on from that when oftentimes mankind does not. How about Paul when he was Saul, and after his conversion, many saw him and doubted, who is he now? We know what he was then. Sometimes people can't get past a sin in life and leave it there without carrying it with us and not in the rearview mirror, constantly looking back. That's why a lot of people are so discouraged, because they say, I can't come to Jesus. I can't come to God. Don't you know what I've done in my life? And they've held themselves accountable and think they're unforgivable. Almost thinking like God can't forgive me. And if you only knew all of what I have done. You can still hear people say that. Well, the good news is, if he can forgive and not hold them accountable and hold us accountable, then there is still good news to deliver to people that we come in contact with. So Gideon will be successful later. See, because when you start reading the story, Gideon, okay, I know, he gets all the men, and they win the battle through God's hand, but he had to learn some things along the way. And we have to learn some things along the way, but right now, he doesn't even see himself and has very limited faith and doubts. He goes on to say, isn't this the same God who brought us out of Egypt? We've been told about these plagues. We crossed over on dry land, and this is what it's all come to? Sounds very much like the wilderness wanderers. You know, we saw that miracle, but you just came and took us out here, Moses, to die. We're out in a desert. There's no water. There's no food. This is a fiasco. In fact, if we just went back into captivity, we get our leeks and onions, and we just, be all, really? That's what you want? Where is God now? According to Gideon, he's left us. Again, ever feel that way towards God? And he says, I'll never forsake you. Sure, I think many of us have at different times in life, if we have to admit. Maybe someone feels that way right now. And that's why this is an encouragement to you. Think he may have left you and abandoned you. This is a 7-year stretch that's been going on. Gideon's just been living life and hiding. And then given us over, like in Gideon's case. I've heard a lot of people in their stories feel just like this, have expressed something along that line. Maybe we've all had in our own way and in our own time. So how does the Lord respond? With an earthquake, with wind and fire? No. Verse 14, and the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours, and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? And he said to him, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. So you're always talking about looking at how we stand head and shoulders. I mean, you come to the wrong clan, and you come to the wrong family. And if you even came to the right family, I'm the least of them. David was the same way. When he was appointed, I say, he went through all the sons. And he said, well, do you have another? Oh, yeah, but he's that young one out tending sheep. Yeah, don't worry about that guy. Oh, he was it. God specifically chose these for that purpose. Verse 16, and the Lord said to him, but I will be with you. I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. Gideon. He will learn and will see that Gideon is not going to be doing the fighting overall success that comes from the Lord and at his hand. And verse 16 says, I will be with you, and you will strike the Midianites as one man. I know we are human, but isn't it interesting how many times we are just a mortal man, want to tell God our resume and why this can't work out? I mean, the God. Our God, and we're going to say, well, Moses tries to say, well, I'm not very good at speech. I'm not the one. You don't choose me. Like there is something that he doesn't know about us, that we feel the need to tell an all-knowing God that maybe he may have missed something. And we tell him our insecurities. From Moses and others, so many others, telling God why it can't be me. The God of the universe must have made a mistake. It's good for us to remember an all-knowing, all-powerful who knew us in our mother's womb, knows all of our days before we even start them, knows each and every thought, knows the hairs on your heads, saved our tears in a bottle, and you don't even know how many times you've cried. And so Gideon, like many of us that don't see the potential in us right now, and God says, I will equip you. This is for my purpose. I will not leave you. But remember also, and it's a good thing to remember, all of this strength and soon to be victory for Israel is not through Gideon. It's not in him. It's God. And he wants everybody else to see that as well. And that's what we need to see, where our strength comes from. God. Paul's the same way. Well, then he says, well, if that's where my strength comes from, then I just need to be weaker. Really, in essence, is what Paul is saying when the thorn in the flesh that was put there. So he was humbled. He's seen a lot, was entered the third heaven. He could get a little arrogant because he once was that man as Saul. And so it put him to humble in there. Paul relays, when I am weak is where I find strength. It's through Christ. It's in him. We can do all things. How? We can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13 says. Gideon goes on to say, listen, how can it be me when I'm a part of the weakest clan of Manasseh? And going further, I'm the least in my father's house. I'm not a strong man of valor. I'm not a mighty man. It's no wonder the message started out with mighty man of valor, how God saw him through what he was going to accomplish. He didn't see it right then. And we may not see it right now. He didn't feel like it, and he was already defeated and was running scared. How often can we think the same thing? As the story goes on, God tells him to assemble his army, and many of you have read this text, and God says, too much. Bring me two. And the number goes down, and God says, too much. In fact, at one time went from 22,000, and he said it was too much. He said, okay, anybody that's kind of afraid and don't want to go this, you can just go home. And the number gets down to 10,000. So, over half leave. Too much, 10,000. And why so? Because the number in Judges 7, which gets down to the 300, which we know. 300 men to do the job. The other number, which they knew, the Lord knew, that if it was with 20 or with 10,000, their numbers would boast upon themselves. And he says, their numbers will boast over God. Well, sure. They will claim victory. We have won. Not impossible, lads. Because 300 this is a death wish. This is my death sentence. So the 300 would not only prove to Gideon and everyone else that would read the story from then on out, that everyone heard the story, everyone knew exactly who the victory was and through. Impossible odds. Then they will see, well, God must have done this. You get a harlot that's in the lineage of Jesus. Comes along the way and she says, you know what? I've seen a lot of things that you guys do, and you carry this Ark of the Covenant around, and wherever it goes, you're victorious. And I may not be a believer right now, but I'm just telling you, if this city is going to be destroyed, you just remember me, because I know what your God does. And now it becomes a belief, a faith, and she is listed as well in Hebrews 11. So there is nothing impossible with God. Can we realize that in our own lives right now, can we see God when we don't see God? Because he wasn't seeing him right then. And then just keep trusting in that. I've had to ask myself that a time or two in my life and in my walk, and I'm sure you do the same thing. It's only natural. I have asked, where is God in my life? Is he here? Where are you? Why this? Why now? He's never left. And especially if we remain faithful with him, knowing that everything that he has said and everything that he has promised, he's going to come through. Because Gideon's challenge was to God, well, where is your good promises? Where are all these good deeds? He gets to see it, doesn't he? See, we fast forward and say, well, we Gideon, 300 men, conquer, winner, wonderful. But you got to take it through the steps as they did. Because in day one, when the angel appears to him and he says, mighty man of valor, he would say, oh yeah, let's go win that war. I trust in you 100%. It's in stages. Took steps. And the steps of faith. And I know he was the world's greatest doubter, because he's the one that asked for the fleece, and he asked for this. Well, if this is really what your will is, will you make this happen? And we wish we could do that. So it's God's purpose for a God's victory. And he can have victory in your life as well. So if you have come across a discouragement and are discouraged right now, I want you to be kind of like Gideon, just open to the possibilities. That it's not set in stone. That is not the way my life is supposed to be. I'm not going to just end up here. It's just a marker. And even though it may be a failure in my life, he's going to judge us as a whole, as your whole life. Not a representation of two little things in our lives. If we can be of any encouragement to you, we offer an invitation that we can pray with you and for you. Maybe you never obeyed the gospel and would like to have that afforded to you as well. Whatever your need is, if you have one, if you'll come now as we stand and as we sing.